We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Boxingego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Caleb Plant rips Canelo Alvarez and details some of the things that created tension and why it's being reported that the talks broke off. Canelo payday, you want payday, I know that. Versus Caleb Plant. We're gonna talk about it. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Do me a solid. If you enjoy the content, throw a like on the video. Hit the like button. That goes a long way when you guys smash the like button to identify this content, the boxing, the sweet science, as something that others may be interested in themselves. So it helps the discoverability. And you guys throw a like on the video. Link in the description. ESPN reports Canelo Alvarez, Caleb Plant fight talks break off over disagreements in the contract. Canelo's longtime goal of becoming undisputed boxing champion is further from reality than ever since he won his 168-pound title in May, right? Boxing's top star was on the verge of a deal to meet Caleb Plant September 18th in Vegas. At PBC Fox pay-per-view, a pact was in the works for weeks, but at the 11th hour, get this, talks have broken off over disagreements in the contract. The contract was passed back and forth between Canelo's team and Al Haymon's PBC over the weekend. After multiple edit requests, the deal collapsed over a stalemate. So in layman's terms, they're saying the fight is over, right? They're saying this is not going to happen next, right? Caleb Plant did an interview and I highlighted it in yellow for you guys to see. Caleb Plant says, Canelo, his bark is bigger than his bite. Canelo was offered the highest guarantee of his whole entire career. He was set to make $40 million plus, Mexican TV rights, and his Hennessy sponsorship. We said, no problem, let's fight. We gave it to him. Then they wanted an upside of the gate and pay-per-view revenue. We said, no problem, let's rumble. So this is Caleb Plant explaining his side. He says Canelo was already getting 40 million plus Mexican TV rights and a Hennessy sponsorship. And we said, no problem. Then he wanted an upside of the gate, the live gate, and the pay-per-view revenue. We said, okay, no problem. So they're showing that there's some compromise being made there. You know what I mean? They're giving in to some of Canelo's demands already. And in pink, it says, it was always agreed that it was a unification, so there was no rematch for either of us. Towards the end of the negotiations, they asked for a rematch when they lose. No problem. You can have the rematch as well. I just want to fight. So Canelo's team, according to Caleb Plant, it was agreed that there wasn't a rematch clause for this particular fight, which is, you know, Bob Arum, he said he don't even like doing rematch clauses. And you don't have to have one, but you can put one in place if it's a high stakes fight like this, undisputed, and you're fearful that you might lose belts, or, you know, just as an added precaution, like Anthony Joshua Ruiz. That's what saved him, because Ruiz would have went back to PBC with all them belts and probably fought Wilder. So the rematch clause can help you in those senses. So Caleb Plant is saying Canelo's team asked for a rematch clause and they revised it and gave him that. Plant told ESPN he agreed to his side of the deal 2 weeks ago with no arguments about money or stipulations, which is ironic because I'm showing you the article, right? He said he agreed 2 weeks ago and he agreed with the money. It's ironic because you have Canelo fans, the diehard Canelo Cinnabons, and they're saying the fight fell apart because of Caleb Plant wanted too much money. But he's telling you that wasn't even the issue. So how are you going to say Canelo is moving on from Caleb Plant because Caleb Plant wanted too much money and demanded too much money, because they're looking to blame Caleb Plant and PBC and Al Haymon, a black advisor, but he's telling you he's already agreed. There was no disputes about money or any stipulations on his side. He says besides the one-way rematch clause, it would only go into effect if Canelo lost. So maybe he wasn't keen on that. It says which Plant said he agreed to. There was also the matter of ring size. Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders battled over the distance inside the ropes, and Canelo won that fight. In the end, Alvarez got his wish, a 22 by 22 foot ring. Nevada State Athletic Commission guidelines calls for a standard 20 by 20 ring. Plant agreed to it. The Nashville native said the star had other ridiculous requests. So Canelo's actually sounding like Billy Joe Saunders here. It says he wanted a certain particular size ring. So they gave him that too. So you could already tell. So from he wanted upside of the pay-per-view and live gate. He wanted a certain size ring outside of the guidelines. You know, he wanted his own size. They gave him that, right? He wanted the rematch clause. They gave him that. So you can already tell Canelo's side is instead of making the fight, kind of nitpicking, according to Caleb Plant. Then he says there were more, quote, ridiculous requests. I've highlighted it in green and teal for you guys so you can see it on the screen. It says one of these requests, one that was absurd, is if I, Caleb Plant, get injured or sick, then Canelo gets a late replacement for the same amount of guaranteed money. But if Canelo were to get sick or injured, then we got to wait for him, Plant added. We're at 7.5 weeks from the fight. We've lost valuable time that should be spent promoting and drug testing for a fight of this magnitude. Wow, that is extremely telling. So Canelo, on top of wanting a one-way rematch clause, he says if Caleb Plant were to get sick, God forbid, get the Rona, get sick or injured and pull out of the fight, then Canelo wanted a late replacement. So let's say Caleb Truax. I'm just throwing the name out there. Just Caleb Truax or John Ryder or whoever, right? As a late replacement for the same amount of money he was going to get for a Caleb Plant unification for undisputed. But that should really raise a lot of eyebrows, me saying that, and a lot of red flags. How would Canelo expect to get the same money for a late replacement when they just told you Canelo was set to make $40 million plus upside of the pay-per-view and the rights and all that, right? So Canelo thinks if he fought Porky Medina, Caleb Truax as a late replacement to fulfill that contract, he still wanted the $40 million. I mean, why would PBC be on the hook for $40 million if a freak accident, one of them got injured or Caleb Plant got injured, or if he tested positive for Rona? I mean, that's ridiculous. But once again, this is Canelo's demands. That sounds crazy. And he says we should be spent promoting because we only got 7.5 weeks and doing drug testing for a fight of this magnitude. So that poses a lot of questions right then and there. Caleb Plant is saying all this time that's being wasted negotiating because he keeps coming up with these little meticulous points and stuff like that. We could be promoting and doing the VADA drug testing and in training camp, right? A pro elite level training camp is probably 8 weeks, 10 weeks. You know what I'm saying? For a big fight you're really preparing for. And they're already under the gun because Canelo has taken so long. And then his side has all these qualms about the contract. But that's shocking. If Caleb Plant were to get the Rona or something, or sick, just a regular cold, and had to pull out, then he wanted to get $40 million still. I mean, that's easily a non-starter. Caleb Plant goes on and says, I question whether legacy or money is the real motive. We've been waiting for him to get done with his wedding. He was shooting a TV show. Canelo was on a golf tournament. And now we've tried to get him everything he wants. And to make this fight, I'm more than willing, able, and ready to fight Canelo Alvarez on any date, says Caleb Plant. Those are the real facts, and this is important. Those are the real facts. And if anyone has something to say differently, we have the paperwork to prove it. Wow, this is a bad look for Canelo Alvarez. And I like Caleb Plant throwing in that last sentence. He says, if anybody wants to dispute it, we got the paperwork. So saying we got receipts. Like it's like in the hood, if you call someone a snitch, you got to show that paperwork. You got to show who they snitched on, the court documents, show receipts of the street infraction that you're accusing them of. Right? Caleb Plant lets it be known that we have all the drafts and all the paperwork to prove it. So I do actually believe Caleb Plant, because you got to look at this. Why would Caleb Plant just wake up one day and start attaching these things to Canelo's name? Like, where did he get these random demands? This sounds like Dave Chappelle when he was playing P. Diddy on the Making the Band skit. I want Cambodian breast milk from an immigrant. I want you to go to Brooklyn for some cheesecake. You know what I mean? And he was doing all these demands. This is, like, where would he even come up with all these things just to make it up on Canelo's name? So we know Canelo's been difficult with the gamesmanship and the strategies, but this is getting ridiculous. It says talks could be revisited, sources said, but time is running out if Alvarez plans to fight on Mexican Independence Day weekend as he traditionally does. That's another red flag. Canelo, of all fighters, has the stature and knows that he wants to fight in these 2 months, years in advance. He says, every year I want to fight on the quote unquote Mexican days, Cinco de Mayo weekend, and also September Mexican Independence Day weekend in America. But this keeps happening with Canelo Alvarez, so you know he's the common denominator. And the funny thing is, because I know some people are like, oh, Ego, you're biased. Why do you believe Caleb Plant? And I will show you why I believe Caleb Plant. On top of what I've read, this is what he's saying. And Caleb Plant says we got the receipts to show you. It's because Canelo continues to be in this spot. He wants to fight on the Mexican days, May and September. So you have plenty of time to prepare. Caleb Plant says he's ready. He keeps saying he's ready. He's succumbing. He's not trying to be the A side. A lot of fans, a lot of the Canelo fans in the comment section I've seen, they're like, oh, Canelo's the A side. Caleb Plant understands that. That's why he's taking the shorter money and giving, and his side is giving or is trying to give Canelo everything that he wanted. But then it started to get egregious. And then, like they're saying, time is running out. And now they're saying, oh, he could fight Dimitri Bivol. So good luck with that. Fight Bivol on DAZN. I have like zero interest in that fight, right? It's just not that entertaining to me, bro. I was looking forward to this. But again, some people are like, oh, how could you believe Caleb Plant? Canelo has a history of this. Common denominator. Boom. Canelo Alvarez. These are all past articles I'm getting ready to show you so I can flame you. Canelo Alvarez IBF title stripped after talks with Sergey Derevyanchenko stalled. So this was when he was with Golden Boy, right? And he was talking to Sergey Derevyanchenko after Kovalev, which I'll get to. And then the talks, you see it. Talks with Sergey Derevyanchenko stalled. So a Canelo fight, the talks with Derevyanchenko, who was the #1 mandatory, and he had the IBF belt, they stripped him because he didn't fight Derevyanchenko. And a black fighter then fought Derevyanchenko after Triple G got whooped by Derevyanchenko. That's the fact. So Canelo had to get stripped. This is at 160 because his talks with Derevyanchenko stalled and he didn't get to fight in September. They just canceled the whole September. Before that, he was talking to Kovalev, ESPN. Sergey Kovalev may move on, which he did, as Canelo talks hit a snag. July 12th, 2019. So July 12th, 2019, August 1st, 2019, what's the common denominator? Canelo talks with Derevyanchenko stall. Before that, Kovalev may move on, talks hit a snag. Here's another one. November 10th, 2020, a year later, Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant appears to be dead for December. So they were talking about fighting December 2020, and then the talks fell apart. Yet again, Canelo. So Canelo, let me put this in order. Kovalev talks failed. Derevyanchenko, talks failed and stalled. Caleb Plant, December 2020 fight, talks failed and he later fought Caleb Smith. And then before that, earlier in the year, Caleb Smith reacts on weird Canelo fight negotiations, right? You see it. Caleb Smith reacts on weird negotiations. And let's hear what he says. Caleb Smith, he later got the fight, but this is earlier. It was a weird situation because it was an exciting situation to be having a 50-50 chance of landing the biggest fight possible, Smith said about being in talks with Canelo earlier this year. It was also frustrating. It dragged out for quite a long time, but it's one of them that I didn't get the fight, but I have no regrets. So wasted all of Caleb Smith's time earlier. This was earlier in the year. And then they later fought after he sued Golden Boy and got out his contract. So April 2020, this is the track record. So another person saying, man, we had these long ass negotiations with Canelo and I didn't get the fight because he didn't at the time. Wait, we got more. Billy Joe Saunders. Canelo contract had no real date and it wasn't signed. So before Billy Joe Saunders initially got the fight in July, prior to that, 2020, he was in negotiations to fight Canelo. It says, listen, they didn't want to give me, look, it's all here. Listen, they didn't want to give me proper time to train and they wanted to take millions of pounds from me, right? I said, if we aren't going to do it properly, we move on. Canelo hadn't even signed the contract yet. Only my signature was on it. I'm not going to the fight Canelo just for a payday. I'm going to win, blah, blah, blah. Before they wanted me to fight on some boat or island or something in America, I said, listen, I'll fight Canelo in Mexico. Why they want him to fight on a boat or island? I'll fight him in his own backyard if you give me the right notice. I'll beat him in Mexico. It doesn't bother me, which they did fight and that didn't happen. The Canelo fight would have been lovely, but I'm not going to do it without a solid camp. I want to give the fight fans a proper fight. But if Team Canelo are trying to take money away and giving me less time, then it won't happen. What's happening now? Caleb Plant talks break off. So I've showed you the chronological order since Canelo Alvarez has been on DAZN. This has been a nonstop problem from 2019, 2020, 2021. So since he's been on DAZN, we've seen this. So why would I not believe what Caleb Plant is saying when every other fighter, even fighters who aren't even with PBC, like Caleb Smith and Billy Joe Saunders, right? Kovalev, they're all, and Derevyanchenko, even though he's with PBC, but those other fighters weren't. And they all said Canelo's team was trying the same games and whatever else, giving them short camps and gaming them and taking forever with the negotiations and nitpicking and wanted me to fight on a boat. It's over. Checkmate.